Survival isn't just about escaping and being able to fend off yourself. Believe it or not, survival is about being prepared and overcoming different threats that you could encounter along the way. And no, I am not just talking about those four-legged and two-legged threats. Some even don't have legs at all. What's up, fellow preppers? I'm Ted from Ant Prepper, and today I am going to list all of the potential enemies that you could possibly encounter in any survival situation or emergency. But before I begin, I humbly ask each of you to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Those little clicks will help me create more videos that are helpful to preppers and those who simply want to survive this crazy world. Now let's get started. Psychological stress and panic. Fear is not just a mind killer. It can actually kill you, literally. You see, panic, psychological stress, and fear can impair your judgment severely, which could lead to a rabbit hole of problems. These things could actually lead you to make accidents and mistakes that you wouldn't usually expect when you have a sound mind. Of course, it's normal to get scared or anxious in high-stress situations. You are a human, so your brain is wired to feel those things, as that's how we respond to stimuli like threats. In fact, the brain actually shifts into the quote-unquote fight-or-flight mode in these scenarios, given that our brains are already injecting loads of cortisol and adrenaline in these events. While it's a normal response per se, the heightened state actually causes what they call tunnel vision, which in turn clouds your ability to make logical choices or evaluate which decision is safe to take. A good example of this is when you are in the wilderness. An encounter with a wild animal, a bear for instance, could prompt you to flee erratically, which of course could cause you to abandon crucial supplies or even your loved ones. It's also not a secret anymore that prolonged stress can weaken the immune system, making it harder to resist illness and infection. You don't want to get sick in survival mode because, more likely than not, medical help isn't available in these instances. There's no one way of controlling panic or fear. The best advice that I can give you right now is to build confidence through consistent training and preparedness. Practice the basics, such as how to build a shelter or how to defend yourself. These things can help you control panic responses. Hunger and malnutrition. No one can outlast emergencies and shtf situations with an empty stomach. Your body needs a fair amount of sustenance so that it can do basic tasks such as walking, running, carrying stuff, and even thinking. Now, food and water are critical resources in survival scenarios. People would die just to get them, so having access to them can be an issue, especially if you don't have a stock or have no means of hunting, growing, and gathering food. Again, keep in mind that you need to expect a complete societal breakdown as your worst-case scenario, and in these instances, regular sources of food and water can disappear without notice. Hunger and malnutrition are deadly survival threats because prolonged lack of food weakens the body, reduces mental clarity, and lowers immunity, making a person more vulnerable to illness, injury, and environmental hazards. When the body lacks sufficient calories and nutrients, it starts breaking down muscle tissue for energy, leading to significant physical weakness. Cognitive function also declines as the brain, deprived of glucose, struggles to maintain focus, decision-making, and problem-solving abilities. This situation compounds other survival challenges, as a malnourished individual is less capable of foraging, building shelter, or managing their environment effectively. Extreme weather conditions. We can never really control the elements. That's how feeble we are. In the face of insurmountable odds, such as storms and heavy drought, the best thing that we can do is adapt to the circumstances. Weather conditions, depending on their severity, can be deadly in emergencies because they can easily impale even the most prepared preppers out there, especially if caught off guard. Sudden exposure to freezing temperatures, for example, can result in hypothermia if you are improperly dressed or wet. This is an absolutely effed up situation, especially if you can't respond properly. Hypothermia is known to lead to permanent body damage and death, as the body loses heat abnormally. Things are equally horrible if you are exposed to extreme heat. You won't die from freezing temperatures, but dehydration and heat stroke can actually put your brittle life in danger. If you're lucky, you'll just suffer mental disorientation and organ failure. Still, you don't want to encounter any of these situations. And let's talk about severe weather conditions, like flash floods, blizzards, and thunderstorms. Originally, these things weren't an issue since folks in the weather could still predict them. But today, that's no longer the case. The weather changes as fast as your girlfriend changes her mind. So, in a survival situation, there's a real possibility that a sunny day can turn into sudden inundation. Again, being prepared is the only way you can overcome the elements. Be as overly prepared as possible by first, wearing the appropriate clothing. Second, having knowledge of safe areas, like elevated ground away from flood zones. And third, having the basic knowledge of weather patterns and signals. Wild animals. The general rule is that you don't really have to worry about wild animals once you are in the urban jungle. They become a factor that you need to consider once you are in the wilderness, or any area that human civilization hasn't touched yet. But still, there's nothing wrong if you exercise caution against these creatures, right? It's pretty obvious that wild animals pose a threat because they are the ones that can actually attack you until you are practically dead. Yeah, I am talking about bears, lions, and even those wild boars. Don't really underestimate the ferocity of these boars, because they have a good body count under their belt. You know, it's not easy to deal with these creatures, especially if you are unarmed or unfamiliar with the local wildlife. The good thing is that these animals don't attack if they aren't threatened. The real issue here is that when you are in the wilderness, it's already difficult to tell if you have encroached on their territory. So yeah, the odds are still not in your favor. And it's not the big and gargantuan beings that you should worry about. Smaller, venomous creatures like snakes, spiders, and scorpions pose risks through bites and stings that may result in severe pain, paralysis, or even fatality if left untreated. The danger also extends to disease-carrying animals, such as rodents and bats, which can transmit illnesses like rabies or hantavirus through bites or contamination of food and water supplies. The best way to deal with this particular threat is to keep a safe distance from wildlife. Come on, we're no longer kids. Bears are cuddly, but they don't get cozy with humans. Don't be impaired in the head by approaching these beings carelessly. You may also want to learn how to properly store food so that you don't attract animals. Also, avoiding areas with fresh animal tracks can reduce the risk of encounters. Hostile humans. The biggest and most obvious threat to your survival is your fellow human. Come on, this is where we excel as a species. We really like to screw one another, don't we? Now, I am pretty much flabbergasted by this thought, considering that first, one-upping one another isn't really necessary, especially in emergencies. And second, our survival is much higher if, we actually work hand in hand. But yeah, those advantages are basically scrapped off most of the time every time things go south. In high-stress or resource-scarce situations, desperation can lead people to act aggressively to secure food, water, or shelter. In post-disaster or survival scenarios, individuals or groups may resort to theft or violence if they feel resources are limited, seeing others as competition rather than potential allies. This hostility can result in direct threats, physical harm, or even death as people prioritize their own survival over collaboration. Unlike environmental threats, hostile human actions are unpredictable, often motivated by fear, hunger, or mistrust, making them a particularly challenging survival danger. To overcome the threat of hostile encounters, maintaining awareness of one's surroundings and practicing caution when interacting with others is essential. As early as now, I really suggest that you start building a community that you trust. It could be your neighbors, relatives, and even your close friends. Building alliances can provide safety in numbers, and at the same time, it also minimizes the need for you to interact with others that you don't know or are familiar with. However, keep in mind that it's wise to exercise discretion about one's resources and plans. It's not a bad thing if you don't want to be open about your resources and assets, as that could make you a target. In some cases, having a means of self-defense may be necessary, although avoiding confrontation is generally safer. Developing trust with others cautiously and learning to read body language or behavior can help gauge intentions, allowing for safer interactions and a stronger network of support in survival situations. Thanks for watching. Times are tough, but I hope that with these videos, we will be able to plan, prepare, and act accordingly. Take care and be ready at all times. See you in my next videos.